Very good afternoon to all of you. It gives me great pleasure to welcome you all again to the third and final session of this 3 days international webinar series on advances in supramolecular and biomolecular research. Today we have with us respected Professor Michael Gromiha, Professor, Department of Biotechnology in IIT Chennai, to deliver his lecture on binding affinity of protein-protein complexes. I request Dr. Murugesan to introduce the speaker to the participants.
Thank you, Dr. Priya. Good afternoon, all of you. On the behalf of Department of Chemistry, I welcoming you all once again for our third day webinar series. I am very happy to invite and introduce the speaker of the day, Professor Michael Kromika. Professor Michael Kromika received his PhD in physics from the Bardiyar University, and he has served as a postdoctoral fellow and research scientist in various reputed international research institutes such as International Center for the various Genetic Engineering and Biotechnology, Italy, the Institute of Physical and Chemical Research, Japan, and the Institute of Advanced Industrial Science and Technology, Japan. He was awarded the SAT Fellowship and RIKEN Fellowship. Currently, he is working as a professor in the Department of Biotechnology, IIT Madras. His main research interests include the sequence and structural analysis, prediction, folding, and stability of the globular and the membrane protein, and protein nucleic acid, and protein ligand interaction. Development of bioinformatics database and tools, structural basis drug design, and next generation sequence analysis. He has published more than 230 research articles, 50 reviews, 7 editorial, and authored 2 books. His paper received more than 10,500 citation, and his H index is 56. He is an editorial board member in the many international peer-reviewer journals. He has delivered several keynotes and invited talks. He receives many awards in his career, such as INSES Senior Scientist Award and an Oxford Press Bioinformatics Prize, ICMR International Fellowship for Senior Biomedical Scientist, Tamil Nadu Scientist Award, to the name of few. On the behalf of organizing committee, I invite Professor Michael Kromika to deliver today's talks. Sir, please take over the session.
Okay, thank you, and I'm glad to be a part of this international webinar on the supramolecular research. And yeah, last 2 days they discussed about some physics and chemistry aspects. Today I'll have a link among biology, physics, chemistry, and computer science. That is kind of bioinformatics. Okay, so the title of my talk is on the binding affinity of protein-protein complexes and how the theory or the computational aspects they agree with these experiments. How can we relate the experiments with computational aspects? Okay, so I'll share the screen. Okay, is it visible?
It's visible, sir.
Okay. Okay, fine.
Sir, please can you put in the slide mode?
In my presentation mode.
Yeah, presentation mode. Yes.
Is it fine
Yes,
now?
sir. Thank you.
Okay.
Yes,
Okay.
sir. Fine.
Yeah. Okay. So I belong to the Department of Biotechnology, IIT Madras, and it's founded in 2004, and we have 29 faculty members and about 500 students. We offer BMS as well as BSMS, it's a dual degree project, as well as MS and PhD degrees. And we are focusing on 4 major areas such as bioprocess engineering, chemical biology, computational biology, and molecular biotechnology. We have a strong background in computational biology, so we have got more than 10 faculty members are working on different aspects of computational biology, say structural bioinformatics, comparative genomics, molecular biophysics, neuroscience, as well as structure-based design. even in this COVID-19 scenario, we are working on some of these aspects, such as what is the synergism of giving these combined drugs used in drug repurposing, or the from natural compounds, or the chemical libraries, or the peptide libraries, or we can design some compounds and so on. Fine. So this is my group. So it's my beautiful campus. I'm not sure how many of you visited IIT Madras. Okay, so I would like to ask you, so you are from which background, the participants? You are from biology background or chemistry background, or? Okay, because when I asked for the talk, whether need the introductory talk or the advanced level, so actually I've been asked to give a little bit research oriented talk, which way my talk will be a little bit high level. I'm not sure whether how many of you are working in this area. So since asked by the organizers, okay, I'll go a little bit higher level research level topic. Okay, if you are not visited IIT Madras, I'm happy to invite you to visit our beautiful campus. And we have various opportunities from we have the collaborations, we have the students, we have the student interchange, and we have the project interchange, and you can visit and then have the interactions with my students and the department as well as with the institute. Okay, I'm focusing on different aspects of proteins, and protein structure, protein function, protein folding, protein stability, as well as the interaction of proteins with other molecules, such as protein-protein interactions, protein nucleic acid interactions, protein carbohydrate interactions, or protein ligand interactions. So I don't want to take all to explain all my research work. Even a single subject is several hours of discussions. Okay, basically I will tell you, it's very simply I will tell you. Okay, in the proteins we mainly focus on protein folding as well as protein stability. We propose the concept of this long range order. I mean the long range order, which relates the contacts between amino acid residues in protein structures. Some of them are close in the sequence, some of them are far away in the sequence. So we consider the contacts which are close in the space and far away in the sequence, and we develop this parameter. And this parameter shows a very good correlation of more than 0.8 with the protein folding rates. That means how fast or how slow a protein can fold from the unfolded state to its native folded state. Fine. So in the case of the protein stability, so we developed a database called ProTherm. It contains more than 25,000 data, and it received more than 1,000 citations. Many protein researchers are using this ProTherm with this experimentally derived database, right, which contains experimental stability information obtained from thermodynamic transfer experiments, right, mainly the thermal denaturation or the denatural denaturation. And the data available in database, right, have been used to understand the factors which stabilize the protein structures and the effects of mutations on stability, and development of several computational algorithms to predict the stability upon mutation either from the sequence or from the structure. CUPSAT is one method we developed using structure. IP3 also we developed using sequence, and STRIDE is a server to identify the structurally important residues. And go with the next aspect on membrane proteins. So we focus on both alpha helical and beta membrane proteins to identify this type of proteins in a group of proteins, to identify the membrane spanning regions and what are the functionally important residues. What will happen if you mutate a specific residue in the membrane, or it will happen if you mutate a residue in the aqueous part on the stability or the disease and so on. Right? So then we focus on protein aggregation as well as different aspects of interactions, like how to identify the complexes or the proteins which interact with the DNA or RNA or the protein complexes, and to identify the binding sites, what is the affinity of the protein complexes or protein nucleic acid complexes, and the databases, right? We developed Pronate, PIND, and the proximate databases for the binding affinity. So we are also working on the structural drug design on various diseases like cancer or the dengue or chikungunya, as well as this COVID-19. Right. In this topic today, I will focus on the protein complexes, how to relate the binding affinity of the protein complexes with various structural features, and what are the bioinformatics aspects that you can understand the protein interactions. Okay, if you see a very broad spectrum of protein complexes, here I show 3 examples. One is on the 1C4 reset, that is the ubiquitination process. So there is a protein modifications like degradation and localization and affect the activity or the promote or prevent the protein-protein interactions. This is another example called a signaling, so the interleukin-4 receptor. This is the complex system of communication that governs the basic cellular activities and coordinated cell actions. And we have the signaling and the molecular switching. So this will have the interaction with the different types of specificity, whether it high affinity or low affinity and so on. And which one gets interact, which one it avoid to interact and so on. Right? So there are various experimental methods like the ITC or the SPR, surface plasma resonance, and the isothermal titration calorimetry to understand the binding affinity of the protein-protein complexes. Right? And the data are available in various databases. And various groups, they focus on any specific complex to understand the factors, what makes this binding affinity high, why it is low, what are the interacting residues, right, and so on. Right. So here you come to the bioinformatics point of view, there are two major aspects. One is at the large scale analysis, one is on the specific protein structural analysis. So here if you take these protein-protein complex structures, you can get the structures, you can identify the binding sites, and from the binding sites you can analyze, okay, what is the preference of residues at the interface, and whether it is possible to predict the binding sites from the known other sequence information or known structure information. So from that, there are various databases and servers available in the literature to understand the binding affinity of the protein complexes at the sequence or structure level. And on the other hand, so it's based on the interacting proteins. That's the large scale analysis. Okay, whether these two proteins can interact or not. If they interact, okay, which proteins can, through different organisms, which proteins can interact, why they will interact, what's the mechanism of the interactions, what will happen to disturb these interactions, so on, right? So these protein-protein interactions have been studied on two different aspects. One is on the same organism or a different organism. For example, host pathogen interactions. For example, if you take the malaria, so it's a plasmodium as well as a human. So where the proteins in the plasmodium, proteins in the human, where they interact, and which part they interact, you can do this docking simulations, and finally you can see whether any other small molecules you can introduce so that you can disturb this type of interaction, so on. Right? So various different types of research going on different aspects. Fine. So here today I will focus mainly on the understanding the mechanism of the binding affinity at the structure or sequence level. Right. So in this case, the first aspect is, okay, if I give you a complex, okay. So here I give the complex. Can you see this complex? There are two different colors. So what are two different colors?
Sir, yes, sir.
Yeah, one is in green and another one is in blue, right? So if you see the first one, it is the green one, and the second one is the blue one. This is the nothing but just a cut from this the complex. If you consider the complex, I cut into two pieces. I put one here and one here, right? So now I try to identify which residues are interacting. That means in this complex, right, there are some residues in the chain A. So for example, that is in green, and then we have the contact with the some of the atoms or residues in chain B, that is in blue, right? So we can use different cutoff distances. So if you consider all the heavy atoms, that means almost all the atoms except hydrogen. So they use the cutoff of 5 angstrom. That means one heavy atom in chain A and one heavy atom in chain B. If these two atoms are within the limit of 5 angstrom, then you can see that these two residues are located at the interface between these two chains, right? So likewise, you can see C alpha atom to 6 angstrom, C beta atom to 6 angstrom. So different threshold as well as different atoms that are considered to identify the binding site. Okay, so now if on the right side, if you see, this is the coordinates of chain A, this is the coordinate for chain B. So we can calculate the distance between any atom in chain A as with any atom in chain B. We have a simple equation, right? The square root of this x1 minus x to the whole square plus y2 minus y to the whole square plus z1 minus z to the whole square, right? So you can calculate, and if you see any pair of atoms in chain A and chain B, they are within this limit of 6 angstrom, then you can see that these residues are at the interface and these residues are interacting, right? That's very simple. Okay, here this is the chain A and chain B, right? If you see this NH1 is arginine, here we use aspartic acid. Here you can see the distance of less than 3.5 angstrom, right? This their interactions, right? So what can we infer from this? If you see the chain A, what is the residue involved in chain A? This is arginine. And here if you see in the chain B, it is aspartic acid, right? The arginine, if you see the atoms are NH1 and NH2, that is nitrogen. And here the aspartic acid, if you see it is OD1 and OD2, that's oxygen. So then from these contacts, we can easily understand which type of interactions are important at the interface, right? So here which type of interactions are important? Well, because this NH2 and the nitrogen and oxygen, nitrogen is positive charge, the oxygen is negative charge. So they make which type of interactions? Right? What is the interaction between positive charge and negative charge? They can form electrostatic interactions, right? So you can see arginine 88 and aspartic 72, right? This experimental alone, they are having the interactions. So they are having the electrostatic interaction, they are forming solvents, right? So in this case, these two residues, they interact with each other, the binding interface. This is what it makes the affinity of these two chains in this particular specific interleukin receptor complex, right? This one aspect. You can easily get the interaction based on distance and identify the residues, and you can see that which type of interactions are dominant at this paging when you show one example. Right, so we developed a server. So in this case, it takes any of the PDB ID. PDB is the protein data bank, right? So it currently it has more than about 160,000 protein structures. Proteins are the protein nucleic acid complexes or protein complexes. Right? It takes the PDB ID. And the chain name is optional. If you want to give it, it's fine. Otherwise, it automatically considers the chain names. And it will give you the identification of binding sites. If you click on that, and it will take a cutoff distance. So you can give any distance. Default value is 3.5 angstrom, right? And it calculates, right, all the possible contacts within your cutoff distance and display all the residues here. Here you can see aspartic acid, residue number 20 or 98, 20, right? Or glutamine 98. So this is atom name and this is chain name. This is a chain B, and finally you can get the distance. Okay, whatever the cutoff distance you use, it will identify the residues within that particular specific cutoff, right? So these are available in our website. So also you can see the structures and you can see interaction sites if you have this JMOL view. So you can see all this information from our website. This is one simple criteria to identify the binding sites. And the second aspect, you can also identify the binding sites using another criteria called solvent accessibility. Solvent accessibility tells you how far a specific residue, for example here, right, is accessible to solvent. So in this criteria, so we consider all the atoms or residues in a protein as interlocking spheres, and we consider water molecule of radius 1.4 angstroms, right? And because this is an aqueous environment, this way we consider water of radius 1.4 angstrom. We roll the water molecule on the surface of the protein, or all the atoms or all the residues, right? And see how far this water molecule can penetrate into the van der Waals surface of each of the atoms in a protein, right? So from that you can calculate the accessible surface area and how far each atom is accessible to the solvent, right? If any atom, any residue is completely inside the protein, what about the value for accessible surface area? Is it high or low? If it is completely inside the protein, that means, right, the values will be so I want the participants to answer some of my questions.
Sir, all are in mute, sir. They have given in the chat box.
Then chat box means, because if I use this, I am not able to, if I use the presentation mode, I am not able to see the chat box.
Sir, they said low.
Let me see how to, because when I go to the presentation mode, then I couldn't see the chat box. What is the chat box? No?
Sir, I convey the answer, sir. They said low.
Okay, fine. Yeah. Now I could see.
I convey the answer.
Okay, fine. Okay, good. Yeah. Because when I
Yes.
see the chat box, then it's easy for me to proceed. Because if you give some lectures, it should be useful to someone. It is not like,
Okay.
yeah, fine. Yeah. Right? Okay, fine. Oh, I could see that. Okay, then anyway, I'll go to the presentation. Because when I go to the presentation mode, I'm not able to see the chat box. Anyway. Okay. Now
Yes.
it is okay. Now it is fine. Yeah. Okay, good. Okay, I'll keep it at the left side so it is easy for me. Okay, I could see that. Fine, good. Yeah, so right it is less. But if it is the residues which are at the surface, maybe it is highly accessible to solvent, the values will be high. Right? So there are various methods to calculate this accessible surface area, like access, n-access, AAC, DSSP, criteria, and so on. There are various methods available in the literature to calculate the accessible surface area. Right? They have their own advantages and disadvantages. Right? Some of them have the standalone only. Some of them we can do the online. Some of the programs give you atomic level ASA. Some of will give you the residual level accessible surface area and so on. Right? This is the comparison among different methods. Okay, you don't have to worry too much about that. Right. So now you have the value. This is one output obtained from the DSSP, the dictionary of proteins, secondary structure of proteins, right? And if you see here, there is a ACC, that is the accessible surface area, right? From this, here you can see the residue number, and here is a AA means this is the residue names, right? And here you can see a secondary structure, and you can see accessible surface area, right? Can you tell me one example where which residues are buried inside the protein using these accessible surface area values? Can you tell one example which residues are buried inside? Leucine 12. Okay, fine. Yeah, correct. This is 0 because it is buried. So can you tell one example which is exposed? Correct, right? So if you see this leucine is buried and glutamic acid is exposed, so that we can see some of these physicochemical characteristics of these residues, right? If you classify the 20 amino acids in two groups, one is hydrophobic, one hydrophilic. Leucine falls under which group of amino acids? Is it hydrophobic and hydrophilic? Hydrophobic, right? Because it is aliphatic amino acid. So this is hydrophobic. Hydrophobic residues prefer to be at the interior of the protein. So that is another reason why this leucine 12 is at the interior of this particular protein. If you see glutamic acid, it is negative charge. So this is we try to be at the surface of the protein because it likes to interact with other molecules, other small molecules, and so on. Right? So here this value is very, very high. So it prefers to be at the surface of the particular protein. Very good. Fine. So now if you see these numbers, if you get, right? So for the computational science or for the programmers, it's easy to interpret to get the residues, right? Which residues are having less values and what is the percentage of residues which are the interface interior or the exterior and so on, right? But for the biologists or for the chemists, if you show this in the form of a figure, right, then they will be very happy to interpret the data, right? So we made a server called ASAView. It's a program, right? So this we can virtually represent this type of residues, whether it is interior or it is exposed. Okay. So I show one figure here. This is for the particular protein, right? So can you see this figure? There are different colors. Can you tell me something about the different colors? So what is the meaning of these gray colors? If you, I mentioned about the residue names also. Gray colors mainly represent which type of residues? Hydrophobic residues, right? If you see the blue color, can you see the blue? Ionic, right? There is a positive charge. And the red one is negative charge, right? So if you see in this figure, also you can see the size. Some of them are very small, some of them are big spheres. So that depends on the value of the ASA. If it is small values, there is small spheres, and the ASA is very good. It is the big spheres, right? So if you see here, most of the hydrophobic residues are located inside the protein, and most of the charge in polar residues and the green or polar residues or at the surface of this particular protein, easily you can understand the concept of the hydrophobic collapse model for the protein folding. The hydrophobic residues tend to be at the interior of the protein, right? And then keep all the other residues, when the polar residues at the surface. Fine. So this is the actual values for the 20 based on the sequence. And you can see several residues which are here and there. They are residues, but they are in the interior core because surface the actual surface area is less. We developed a server. It is easy for the students. So if you give a PDB ID and get plot, it will ask you which plot type of plot do you want. So if you see this kind of a spiral plot, this the regular plot and so on. Right, fine. Okay. So now if you got the original number, just you click on these values, you will get the actual number for that one. Right. So now I go with this axial surface area is also used to identify the residues which are at the interface. Right. So if you see here, okay. So if you see here, so again the slide shows three different figures, right? The first one is, the last one is a complex, and the other two are just the broken pieces from these. Okay. So we calculate the ASA, right, for the single protein, for example, the green color protein or the blue color protein, as well as with the complex, the full complex. Some residues, right? The axial surface area is the same, even if you consider the chain A alone or the green alone, or with the complex, green and blue together, right? So can you tell where these residues are located specifically? You can see the near the highly spherical region, the outside region, right? So whether it is a complex or whether it is a single chain, so the values are same. Some regions, if you see, the area is very high, right, in the free protein, but that is low in the case of the complex. Can you tell which regions have this difference in ASA? Right. So my question is, some residues, right, which accessibility is very high in the free protein, but the accessibility is low. Okay, fine. This interface between the two. If you see here, you can see the values are very less, mainly because the second chain that is also shielding this region. And if you see here, you can see it is completely open, so values are high, right? So now we can use this concept. Okay, if you have the axial surface area, take the full complex or take the protein alone and see the difference in the ASA. If the difference is more than 1 angstrom square, right, that you can put any cutoff, right, then you can see that these residues are at the interface, right? This, I show an example, right? So you can see here on complex and the chain, the protein-protein interaction, chymotrypsin Eglin complex, right? So two chains, one is chain E and one is chain I. So some of them are the same values. So here in this case, they are not at the interface. Some of them reduce the accessibility. So you can see that these residues are located at the interface, right? So what is the first method? Distance. Second method, solvent accessibility, right? And the third method, this is called the energy-based approach. So you can get the energy as a criteria, right, to identify the interacting residues, right? So in this case, we calculate the energy using this force field. So the first one is a van der Waals interaction. The second one is the electrostatic interactions. Hydrogen bonds are also included in this van der Waals interaction when we calculate the values of A, I, and B, J, right? So now what we did, so we constructed a set of complexes, right? Where shall we get the information regarding protein-protein complex structures? Are you familiar with any database which contain the three-dimensional structures of protein-protein complexes? Yes? No? Okay. So there is a database called a Protein Data Bank. That's the PDB. That Protein Data Bank is a collection of experimentally determined 3D structures of proteins and their complexes, right? So several experimentalists, they did the experiments using X-ray crystallography or NMR spectroscopy or now cryo-electron microscopy, right? They solve the structures of proteins and their complexes and they deposit in a database. That is called the Protein Data Bank. CSC is Cambridge Structure Database, that is mainly for the small molecules, right? So PDB is mainly for the macromolecules. Right, here they have the information regarding proteins and complexes. So here they have an option to check the macromolecular type. So you check it contains proteins and the proteins, then it will give you all the protein complexes. Protein complexes are two different types. One is the homo and one is the hetero. Homo means if there is two chains, okay, they both are the same chain, it's called homodimers. If one chain is higher different molecule and second is different one, and the both are different, right? Then you can say they are heterodimers. The two chains with the different molecules, they are hetero, right? So likewise, you got dimers, trimers, tetramers, like many oligomers, right? So here I discuss mainly about the heterodimers. That means two chains, and two chains are different, right? One has high molecular weight, one has low molecular weight. Fine. So now if you have two chains, okay, see the two chains here, like this is an example. This one chain, this another chain. So take all the atoms in chain 1 and all atoms in chain 2, we calculate interaction energy. Right? You use the force field to calculate the energy, and for each atom pair, and take first complex, calculate each atom, then sum up for each residue, and for each residue, right, if you make a cutoff of say 1 kilocalorie per mole, then you can see that these residues are mainly at the interface, and these residues are the interacting residues at the protein-protein complex. Okay, so I'll show the data. So I calculate the energy, right? So then for each interval, for example, -2 to -1.9, 1.9 to 1.8, then the terms of 0.1. So I can see this is the frequency. And here is the cumulative frequency. This up to -2. Here you can see up to 100. Right. So this is the cumulative frequency of this all the residues. Right. If you see here, at the range of around 0 to -0.1 kilocalorie per mole, there's a peak. That is about 77%. Right. Why this is there's a peak here at the energy of about -0.3 to 0. So what does it mean if this peak? So the energy is completely zero. That means what's the meaning of interaction energy is 0 or -0.1? So it's completely zero. That means no interactions. There is no residues or in contacts. That means there are many residues, right, which are far away in the structures. This is not a not complex formation. They form the complex, but these residues are not interacting. For example, if you see in this figure, right, here if you take one residue here and one residue here, right, both are outside. Sorry, both inter extremes. Then you can see that there's no interaction. The energy is almost zero. But if you see near the interface, here you can see the interactions, and there you can see there is some percentage of residues which are having interaction energy of -1 to -2 kilocalorie per mole. Right? Fine. So here that is true because about 80% of the 76% of residues which are not interacting in the complex because not the interface. Only other residues are located in the interface. Right? So we can make the cutoff of 1 kilocalorie per mole. So you can see around this about 11% residues which are at the interface if you consider the cutoff of -1 kilocalorie per mole. Right? That is fine. Yeah, that is usually about 10 to 12% of residues which are at the interface in protein complexes. Right? So now the question is, okay, so we find the residues which are at the interface. Okay, some residues. Is there any preference or any preferred residues which are at the interface? Right? So then we did the preference, we calculate the binding propensity, right? That is n bind of I, this number of binding site residues at the interface, normalized with the total number of residues in a particular complex, right? So here I used the receptors and ligands. This is just for the namesake, right? I took the high molecular weight as receptor and low molecular as ligand, but the trend is almost same. Both the case same. So in this case, it doesn't matter. Okay, if you see the receptor, right? Some residues are having higher values, right? Which residues are high propensity? Which residues are high propensity? From these numbers, you can see the arginine and the tryptophan, tyrosine. These residues are high propensity at the interface. Even if you see the ligand, you can say same trend because you can see the arginine, tryptophan, tyrosine. The numbers are very high. It's mainly because number of residues in the complex is, in the ligand side is less compared to the receptor. That is why the numbers are high. But if you see a trend, it's the same. Okay. So now if you see some residues are prepared at the interface. So if I show one more example, right? So if you see here, these are the residues. In the receptor side, it's the ligand side. So you can see one example. Okay, it is making some sort of interactions. This arginine 1112 with the tryptophan 144. Right, is making this cation by interactions. Right. So now the question is, okay, these residues are important. These residues are at the interface. Are there any preferred residue pairs? Right. So at the interface. So we did that. So we use this equation. Okay, we use the preference of I, j. That's the preferred amino residue pairs. Nij, this is the number of pairs of any residues. I is from the protein 1, J is from the protein 2. Normalized with the number of residues of type I and number of residues of type J. Right? You see here, some of them are having interactions like aspartic acid and arginine. And if you see the other way around is also, you can see that with arginine and aspartic is also, you can see high frequency. Then arginine, tyrosine, tryptophan, tyrosine, tryptophan, and so on. Right? If you see these preferred pairs, right, we can see some type of interactions. Can you guess? Can you find which type of interactions are preferred at the interface? Okay, let's see one by one. If you take the aspartic acid and arginine, which type of interactions they make? Electrostatic, fine, good. If you take the arginine and tyrosine, right? So this is a positive charge. This is the pi system. So this may be cut and by interactions, right? Yes, you are right. Cut and by interactions, right? And then if you see the tyrosine and the tryptophan, right? So here this is the aromatic ring. Here also aromatic ring. So you can take the pi-pi interactions. So you can see the aromatic interactions, right? So they make some sort of specific interaction. You can see the other way around also with arginine glutamic acid, and you can say they are high frequency. So now the question is whether these interactions are specific or not. If these interactions are made by the main chain atoms, then the interactions are not specific. But if these interactions are with the side chain atoms, then these interactions are very specific, right? So in this case, just we checked the average energy for the main chain atoms as well as the side chain atoms. If you see the numbers, here side chain atoms are more prevalent than the main chain atoms. That means the interactions are mainly due to the side chain atoms. That means it is very specific, right? So then that tells you these interactions are dominant. Okay. Okay, so we got all this information from the 3D structures. Okay, how can we verify this? Is it really true or not? Right? So in this case, we developed a database called the PIN database, that is thermodynamic database for the protein-protein complexes. So then 140 complexes, 1,007 interactions. Currently, we published in 2018, we published another database called Approximate. Right? It contains about 6,000 data. That is the latest one. I will show you after a while. So we define the hotspot residues. That means if you mutate any particular residue, if it changes the binding affinity of more than 1 or 2 kilocalorie per mole, that means some residues are very important. If you mutate these residues, that will alter the binding affinity drastically. They are called hotspot residues. We collected all the hotspot residues, right? Okay, this is the results from this page, and this is the data. So we use minus more than 2 kilocalorie per mole as hotspot residues. We identified 270 interactions and 68 unique. And if you see the unique interactions, most of the residues involved in these interactions are positive charge, negative charge. They are forming electrostatic interactions. And if you see the positive charge aromatic, there is about 32, and the hydrophobic residues are only 7. That means binding interface of the heterodimers are mainly dominated by the electrostatic or van der Waals or the hydrogen bonding interactions. Hydrophobic interactions are dominant mainly in the case of the homodimers. Okay, so what? So now this is the case we got from the experiments. Now we try to relate this data with known experiments. So I collected the data from the literature, and this is one specific complex, UBC-H1 complex, right? So here, these others, they did 49 mutations, and 15 are hotspots. Among the 15 hotspots, you can see that 5 are involved in cation, 5 interactive residues, anion electrostatic interaction complex. That means positive or negative charge resistance. Right? Specifically, they mutated phenylalanine 63 into alanine. Right? They found that the delta G, the free energy change is 3 kilocalorie per mole. That means they are very strong. So now we took the structure, and here is the phenylalanine and here is the tyrosine. So we get the interactions. The interaction energy is minus 1.2 kilocalorie per mole, and mainly these interactions are mainly due to the side chain atoms. Then one example for the cut and by interaction. Here they mutated tyrosine 127 into alanine. So they showed the free energy change of 2.2 kilocalorie per mole. So here the tyrosine 127 is having the interaction with arginine 85. Right here this is cut and by interactions, and the interaction energy of minus 2.4 kilocalorie per mole. Here you can explain these interactions are broken, disturbed if you mutated this tyrosine into alanine. This is another example. This is very interesting. So here if you see, they did two types of mutations. One is K32, K is a positive charge. It also changed the free energy 2.5 kilocalorie per mole. Aspartic acid 238, right? It change of free energy 3.9 kilocalorie per mole. Right? But these two are forming electrostatic interactions, K and D. So if you see the structure here, this is the D, this is a K. They are forming the interaction energy of minus 2.5 kilocalorie per mole. And these interactions are mainly due to the side chain atoms and not to the main chain atoms, right? So this shows that the electrostatic interactions are also dominant in the protein phase. That means you can say that these weak interactions, electrostatic or the cut and by interactions or aromatic interactions, they initiate the interactions, and the hydrogen bonds which will give the strength, and the atomic interactions finally help to stabilize the complex, right? So now we can see there is the experiments and the computer aspects. We can see there's a correlation between these two. Okay, so what? So what can we use it? Okay, these residues are identify these residues are important, right? So how can we use it? How to interpret data, right? We can use these results, right, to predict the binding affinity of protein-protein complexes, because these are the various interactions. These are the various residues, right, which are identified to be important to the binding interface, and we use this information. Can we use to predict the binding affinity, right? That is the next part of my talk. Maybe I got 10 more minutes and I will go through that. Okay, so far, okay, what are the different criteria we use to identify the binding sites? What are 3 different criteria we discussed to identify the binding sites? Thermal accessibility, yes. Other 2, distance, energy, right? 3 different criteria. So what are different, which interactions are dominant to the binding interface? Which residues are dominant to the binding interface? Right, ionic interactions, right? So mainly the residues, tyrosine, tryptophan, arginine, these are important. Make ionic interactions, cation interactions, pipe interactions, so on, right? Fine. Okay, so now I'll touch a little bit regarding the binding sites. Okay, so we use this information to discriminate or to predict the binding affinity of protein-protein complexes, right? So if you want more information, you can see some of my review articles or some of my books. You get all the information, right? So here we need to follow a specific procedure for constructing any bioinformatics based method. First, the issue is first we have developed data sets, and we have derived the important features which are applicable to your field of interest, the topic of this research problem, and we have to select the features and develop methods, and finally assess the performance of the method and validate it with the external data sets, and then finally from the application point of view you have to develop a server. Okay, so now that now if you see we collected data, right? So we have the free protein, right, free protein 2, and we have the complex. So we have the complex, we know the binding affinity KD or delta G, right, for any particular complex. So we classify 2 different groups. One is the high affinity or low affinity based on the KD values, right? Then we try to develop a method to predict, to identify whether this is the high affinity complex or the low affinity complex, right? We can make different methods. Either you can use the structures, That's what I discussed just before, where we can get all the information using the complex structures, right? And then we can derive some parameters and we can relate. Or we can take the sequence. From the sequence, we can develop some parameters and try to discriminate using sequence-based features. Of course, the structure-based features have more information. It can predict well than sequence-based features. But the disadvantage is it needs structures for the analysis. So if you go with the large-scale analysis, for example, in the human genome or any genome-wide analysis, then the structure-based methods have the issues because of the no structures. So because sequence-based methods, you can easily use it for any network analysis or any genome-wide analysis. That is the reason why we developed methods using amino acid sequence. Okay, so we collected several properties, right? So from these properties, you developed some features, and these features we related to the binding affinity, and we developed a model to predict the binding affinity and evaluate it, and then finally we developed a server so that we can use it to predict the binding affinity for any protein-protein complex. Okay, so we did the database and we select some specific among the 500 plus features. We selected only a few features, and here you can see the predicted number of aromatic and positive amino acid residues in the binding sites. They are also identified to be very important, and here this plays a major role to predict the binding affinity. And I show here you can see the number of aromatic and positive residues, and here the percentage of complexes with the high low affinity. You can see the green is high affinity and the black is low affinity. Up to seven residues, right? You can see it is less, but once it is more than 9, you can see high affinity complexes have a large number of the difference between the high affinity and low affinity complexes. That means the predicted aromatic and positive charge residues are the binding sites, which are important to discriminate the binding affinity of these protein-protein complexes. Fine. So we use various machine learning techniques because I don't have time to explain all these things. For example, neural networks or support vector machines, right? So we can assess based on different aspects what is sensitivity and specificity as well as accuracy, right? Sensitivity tells you the true positive divided by true positive plus false negative. That means if your experiment is positive and the predicted is positive, that's called true positive. If the experiment is positive and the predicted is negative, right? That is false negative. And the experiment is negative and you predict as wrongly plus, that is false positive, and both are negative, that's called true negative, right? Okay, I have one question, right? So here I gave experimental one in the first line, and the predicted is second line. You can see B as positive and N as negative, right? How many true positives? Take B as positive, experimental is B and the predicted is B, that is called true positives. How many true positives? Five. Good. So how, right? So how many false positives? False positive means experiment is negative and the predicted is positive. 7. Okay. How many false negatives? Right. So how many true negatives? True negatives means experiment is N and predicted is also N. Only 9? 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, no more. Here is N, predicted also N. Both should be N. 1, 2, 3, 4, 14. Okay. Okay. Now can you tell the sensitivity and specificity? Sensitivity you can calculate because now you have all the numbers. True positive divided by true positive plus false negative. So what is sensitivity? Quickly, because I don't have much time. Five divided by 5 plus 5 plus how many false negative? 0.2. True positives are 5. What is true positive plus false negative? is 0.4. Okay, what is specificity? Specificity is true negative, that is divided by true negative plus false positive. No, it should be more. Because true negative is 14. 14 divided by 14 plus false positive is 6, 20. So 14 by 20, that is equal to around 0.7, right? Correct. What is accuracy? True positive plus true negative, that is 5 plus 14, 19 divided by total 32, right? Right, so that is what is the value? 0.6. Okay, so what can we tell from these numbers? So now we got a sensitivity of 0.4 and the specificity of 0.7, accuracy of 0.6. Accuracy is a balance between sensitivity and specificity. Sensitivity is 0.4, specificity is 0.7, right? That means this method is good to exclude the negatives rather than identifying the positives, because positives it can identify only up to 40%, and the negatives it can exclude right up to 70%, right? Okay, now I have a question. We say 100 residues, right? 100 residues, 90 are positive and 10 are negative. Okay, so if a method predict all the 100 as positive, what is the accuracy? I repeat the question. 100 residues, 90 are positive, 10 are negative. If your prediction method predicts all the 100 as positives, what is the accuracy? 0.9, right? So this is a good method or not? This method is good? Yes? Any other answer? Okay, what is the sensitivity? What is the sensitivity? Because it is 98 positives, all the 90 are correctly predicted. That means sensitivity is 100%, right? What is sensitivity? It is 1. What is the specificity? Correct. Sensitivity is 1. What is specificity? How many true negatives? 0. So now can you tell this method is good or not? Is it good or not? No, right? So you give the answer yes, immediately it change your mind, you give the answer no, right? Yeah, because no method is not required, because it predict everything as one side, right? So here, so this is the reason why we need the sensitivity separately. If you see only the accuracy, it is 90%, immediately we will tell okay, 90% is very good, right? So in this case we can go ahead with the method, but that is not the case. So if you see the sensitivity and specificity, it is not able to identify even a single negative residues correctly, right? That means it is not good. So if you develop a method, you have to see a balance between the sensitivity and the specificity, right? That is called the AUC curve. Right? It will tell you the trade-off between sensitivity and specificity, right? So that is very important, right? So now I show my data. So they also you can validate with the different methods. Like if you use 100 data, check, develop a method with the 100 and value with the 100, or take some for training and some for test, right? So use the different cross validations and jackknife and so on, right? So here we did that. So here first we 10-fold cross validation, right? What is 10-fold cross validation? You classify the data into 10 groups, take 9 groups for training and last group for test. Then shuffle it. Then do it again. Another 9 groups for training, 1 test. So do 10 times so that each group will be tested at least once, right? That is called the 10-fold cross validation. So here the performance, if you see the sensitivity and specificity, right? It is similar, 75 and 79. So in this case, it's a balance. So that seems to be fine. Then we can use the training and the test set that we got similar results. And external test sets, so we can do that, and we got it so correctly, so we can be happy. So proceed with that. Okay, then we deal with the new data sets because we have more number of data sets. We have to try it, and here also we get the similar accuracy. Okay, so I got 2 minutes. So in this case, I just skip these calculations, right? I'll show you one database, so that will be useful for you. So I discussed about the database. This is called the Proximate. This the experimental database which contains thermodynamic binding affinity of protein-protein complexes as well as their mutants. What will happen if you mutate a particular residue, right? So this is our website, Proximate, right? You can access it. It is free for academic purpose. So you can use the database, and here there's various options. You can use any protein names, or you can take any mutant residues, or you can see any experimental techniques, right? You can choose various options. When you have time, maybe I'll show the, just you click Proximate, you will get the site, or just click my name, we'll go to my site and I list up all the server resources in my page, and you can just access the site. So I don't know how to explain. Okay, so here you can get these 2 complexes with all the data. So here the interaction details, why are they interacting, what experimental data, right? How they got the data, what the conditions, and so on. And this is a string, so how they are connected with the other proteins. So because sometimes if you want the human protein interactions, so you need to see which residue, which protein they are interacting. So here you can see the network of interactions, and this can use our method to see these interactions are low affinity complexes or high affinity complexes, and what will happen if you mutate any particular residues in these complexes and so on, right? Fine. So here we have 6,300 complexes. Now she is updating this one, and we'll soon cross about 8,000 data, right? So these are the type of mutations, and you can see different value. This is a comparison with the database and so on, right? So it is linked to the different databases, and using this we developed a method to predict the binding affinity. So I don't have time to explain all these things, and if you see the our server resources, you can get all the information, right? So this I skip, right? Yeah, so this is our server to predict the binding affinity. It takes your sequences, sequence A and sequence B, right? And these are your mutations, right? This will give you the predicted delta G, whether it is positive or negative, or decrease affinity or the increase affinity with the exact numbers, right? This is our website, so you can access it. Okay, I think I'll close it. And so, can you summarize what did we discuss in this lecture? Right. First, we identified the binding sites, and we try to understand the relationship between experiments predicted binding affinities using structure analysis and the thermodynamic data. And we discriminate the binding based on the affinities, and we have the database, right, and predict the binding affinity upon mutations. Okay, so I thank my collaborators and the funding from the different funding agencies. These are my books, right? One I published in 2010, Protein Bioinformatics, and 2020 just published in March, right? So if you need YouTube, I'm not sure, because I think this book, Protein Bioinformatics, I requested the publishers to give very less price for the students. So I think they charge about 300 to 400 rupees. That is a very minimal price you can get from the Elsevier publications. And this is just published World Scientific, and this is also available online. So maybe you can get this book, and you'll get more information regarding the protein interactions, especially what we discussed in this lecture, right? Okay, thanks for your kind attention. And if you have any questions, maybe I can happy to answer, or you can send email, or anything is fine. Okay.
Thank you very much, sir, for your detailed explanation. It was very informative, and you made the session very interactive as well. I thank you once again for joining us today. So can we have a few questions today?
Yeah, disorder regions. Yeah. Because you asked about it, because disorder regions, they don't have the structures. So in this case, we cannot have the structures. So in this case, structure-based methods won't work. But sequence-based methods, we can. There are many methods available to predict the predictive solvent accessibility from sequence. Right? They use this some multiple sequence alignment with the conservations, so you can predict the ASA of these disorder regions. Or you can do one thing is we have to model these disorder regions because it is disordered. So, but anyway, even if you model from these other techniques, then you can try to get the values.
So we have one more question from Priya. Various methods are available to study binding affinity of protein complex. Will the results coincide with each others?
Yeah, actually, if you see, I discussed 3 methods, and you can see that is about 80 to 90%. You can see a similar results because the concept is the same. If the distance, if you take, if it is thereby, then only the distance is less. Accessibility service also, if there is close, then only the ASA changes only if there is some change. But only the problem is your how much threshold you use. That is the main aspect. But the energy-based approach is little bit different because sometimes with repulsive interactions, right, it may not consider as these preferred ones. But the distance-based criteria, it will consider as the preferred ones. That is one difference. And the second thing is in the distance-based criteria, any distance if coming within particular threshold, it will consider as binding. But because the energy-based criteria, it considers the distance plus all the other charge and electrostatic interactions plus van der Waals interaction to calculate the energy. In this case, the distance also matters. It just you cannot say that within this any particular threshold. So these advantages of the energy-based approach compared with this distance-based criteria. But you can see about 90 to 80 to 90% residues which are can see the same in all the criteria.
And one more question. Does the server work for a modeled protein structure also, or it needs a PDB ID?
Yeah, it works for the model. If you there is option for the upload option. So if you have your structure, you give the upload your structure and it will give you the binding set information. Yeah.
Considering there is no more questions, I would like to thank again Dr. Michael Kromiga for joining us today. Thank you very much, sir. So we have come to the end of the webinar series, and at this moment, on behalf of the organizers, I'd like to thank all the participants for enthusiastically participating throughout the webinar series. I would also like to thank our head of the department, colleagues of Department of Chemistry for their support, and SSN management for giving us this wonderful opportunity to conduct this webinar series. I would also like to thank all the speakers for sharing their knowledge and experience with us. So thank you once again, everyone, for joining us today. Thank you, sir. So I'm ending the session now. We will send you the feedback link as well through email. And if you have any queries, we are always open to email. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir, once again.
Yeah, thanks, sir.